Welcome. My name is Deborah Wright, and I'm here with the honor of interviewing tonight on behalf of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame, Dr. Jean Chan, Professor of Mathematics at Sonoma State University, and this year's recipient of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame honoree in the field of education. Welcome. Good to have you with us today.
Thank you.
You were born in China and live now in Marin and teach
right.
at Sonoma State. Completely different worlds and environments from one another. Tell us a little bit about your roots of being born and the time that you lived in China. What was it like there for you?
I was born in Taishan. That's in the province of Guangdong. During the Japanese War, during the World War II period, my father had to go north. So he left my mom and my brother, and we went back to live in the village. And we had really hard time for 4 years because we were separated. We didn't know whether my father was alive. And my mom had to sell most of her stuff, her jewelry and clothes, just to buy food for us. But it was really a good experience, even though sometimes we almost didn't have enough to eat. But when I think back the time, it was still very warm, very nice.
Those felt like good times for you in some regard.
Because there were so many relatives around, and we live among relatives, and everybody knows everybody else, so it was a nice experience just the same.
Tell us about your siblings. You were first among how many?
Well, actually there were 7. I had a brother, but he died. He died when he was 4.5. That's one of the saddest things in our life, and it's hard for me to talk about it even now. And that, my brother would have been our only brother. So my parents had more children in the hope of having another boy, but they never did. So I got 5 more sisters. So now we have 6 girls.
Wow.
And I'm still the oldest one. My brother was number 2, and then we have 5 more sisters. And my parents always said they're raising me as a son. And they always said, well, we didn't mind when you were a girl because we knew we would have more boys, but then more girls came. But I'm really proud of my sisters. They all are doing very well in their lives. So my sister all said because I went on to get my doctorate, they felt the pressure they have to excel too. So I don't know how much that really forced them to go on, but they're very talented people.
Was it perceived, I'm curious, the notion of excelling and achieving, was it perceived more as opportunity or as expectation?
Expectation.
So this is what is my duty to be able to work and pursue a field of excellence in whatever the field is. Was there a breadth of opportunity of what that field might be for you when you were young?
When I came to this country at 18, I hardly spoke English. My choices were very limited. I could not have gone into law. I could not have become a sociologist. I wouldn't know enough English. But math was easy. It's just reading ABC and XYZ with a plus sign, negative sign. So
it was the universal language.
Yes, that's right.
And so it was the one you could speak with other people.
That's right. And I always liked math to begin with, but I really didn't know I was going to become a mathematician. I was going to become a elementary school music teacher. I was in a teacher school to become a music teacher for a first grader, but my parents wanted to come to this country. They kind of forced me to come. I didn't want to come, so I actually wanted to stay. At that time, we were in Hong Kong.
And where was it that you came when you first arrived in the States?
Chicago.
In Chicago.
So my grandfather had a business there.
I'm curious, at an impressionable age of 18, arriving in an entirely foreign culture where you don't speak a language, what was it that you saw at that time that had an influence on you thinking this is a road that I can take in mathematics, or other than the language barriers and how those were overcome through mathematics? Did you see it as a land of opportunity for women who wanted to pursue careers, or did you arrive in a time of transition over that issue?
No, when I arrived, all I wanted to do was a scheme to go back to China, truthfully. I planned to finish college and then go back to China to live. Meanwhile, I met my husband. So we got married after.
And the plan changed.
The plan really changed. That was a cultural shock. It was a difficult decision for me.
Yeah.
It took me years to come to a comfortable decision.
What is that road, at that fork of the road of being married and the decision being made to stay in the United States, how has that influenced your sense of development and professionally as a woman?
That actually changed my life. First of all, when we got married, I got married, then the first year we got married, I went back to school to get the master's degree. And then we had a first child, we had a boy. So I thought I would stay home and watch the boy. And then I read Betty Friedan's book, Feminine Mystique. And that single book really changed my life.
Tell me about that.
She was describing me. She was describing someone like me who's used to intellectual stimulation, and suddenly I found myself staying at home, and I didn't have anybody I can talk to besides my little baby who wasn't talking yet. And for some reason, some of my classmates, they were Chinese classmates at that, they told me that I was supposed to fulfill my dream living through my husband. I thought that was the thing to do, but then I kept thinking, what is this all about? I didn't understand this. But reading that book really opened my eyes.
That book opened a lot of women's eyes.
But I was very alone. You know, people might have friends to talk about. I didn't have any friends to talk about that issue. My sisters were way too young. I really felt pretty alone. And when I talked to my husband about that, he didn't quite understand what I was struggling with.
How'd you find an outlet for all of the energy that got opened up in you when you read her book of recognizing, aha, this is me, and some sense, I'm sure, of something needs to change? How did that get expressed? Did it create controversy?
I don't think so, because I was already thinking about enrolling in the PhD program at UCLA. We were in LA at that time. But I didn't take my PhD program very seriously because I was so busy with the baby. But after I read the book, she recounted story after story. After I said, well, this is me, that's me, and this is me, I said, well, there's lots of people like me out there. I don't know where they are, but they're somewhere. So I took my study more seriously. So I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take 2 courses every semester as my baby grows up. As you know, I can do some of that at home. So we made an arrangement. My husband was teaching then, so he took an evening schedule so I can go to school during the day. So it worked out.
So he adjusted his schedule so that you could both pursue the tracks that you wanted to do.
Well, actually, it was by fate. He was new faculty. New faculty gets stuck in the evening schedule. But it worked out for us. But it was not easy. It was really a very difficult period of 10 years where I felt that I was doing something not quite right no matter what I do. Whether I was in graduate school, I felt that I should be at home. When I'm home, I felt I should be working. My mom kind of thought that I wasted my education since I was just staying home. But now that I'm older, I really am happy that I chose to stay home part of the time, because that was really for me too. It was really fun to be spending part of the time at home with the children.
It's a different experience to be a pioneer, first or second generation in a field where you're opening the doors for things that'll change behind you. Being a woman in the field of mathematics, that's often considered a man's field, or has been. When you were studying in that field, was that your experience? Were you one of very few women that were studying in those departments?
Yes, yes. Often I would be the only woman, but it didn't bother me. That didn't bother me at all. I got a lot of attention.
Did you find when you came out and were ready to go into the marketplace to teach that it worked for or against you at that point?
I graduated in the year when there were no jobs for professorship, but I found a part-time job anyway. And then later on, I found a full-time job later the next year. And then my husband's company decided to move up to Marin, and I was happy to leave LA. So that's when I found the Sonoma State job. And I've been with them ever since.
How was the move to Marin for you? Was it something that helped you get out of that sort of never landing in the right spot feeling? Were things more cohesive for you here?
Yes,
or what?
yes. I joined the Marin Chinese Cultural Group. I became the president of that group, and my husband became very active there, and our children went to the Chinese school, so I felt I belonged.
There was a sense of home and belonging for you here.
Yes, yes. And Lucas Valley has become my new village. And recently I had a block party, and I invited the whole block. I was telling my neighbors, I said, this is ridiculous. I lived here for 25 years, and I still haven't met some of you. I said, if this were a Chinese village, I would have known everybody. I would have known your aunts and uncle and cousins. So everybody came to my backyard, and they said, this is a good idea. So everyone had a good time.
That's wonderful. In reading your materials, several people talked about this wonderful program that you had set up that I want you to tell us and our audience about, called Expand Your Horizons. Tell me about how that
Expanding Your Horizon. Okay. I didn't start it. It just somehow got started. This is called the Expanding Your Horizon Conference. In the middle of March, there are conferences across the nation. We are having one near Sonoma State. We alternate with Santa Rosa Junior College, and we invite the 9th grade girls to come on campus. And what we do is have a big lecture, and it could be a woman astronaut, and could be somebody accomplished to give the keynote address, and then we break the girls into sessions. And each session would be led by a woman professional. And I usually do a workshop. Sometimes I teach them Chinese character and geometry, because Chinese characters are very geometric, and sometimes I teach them mathematics or do symmetry. And there was a pilot and a physician, an architect last year. So it's really good. Some of my current students in college grew out of those conferences because they went to a conference and they became interested in math and science, and they grew up. In fact, one of the students is now working for a doctorate in statistics.
Wow.
So I'm
Their
seeing
eyes
some.
were opened at that impressionable age of their wondering what options were open to them. Through the conference, they could see the breadth of what was available.
That's right. We also encourage them to keep on taking math, because if they don't take enough math classes in high school, a lot of fields are blocked. They just cannot enter. It doesn't matter if they don't go into mathematics, but they cannot go into chemistry, they cannot become a physician. So it's really important that the girls would persist in taking math.
Were there obstacles for you along the way? Were there brick walls that you ran into, other than the moves that your family made that in pursuing your sense of what you wanted to in mathematics?
Do you mean in my career or in the pursuit of my education?
In pursuit of the education is what I was thinking.
No one stopped me, but I really never got any encouragement from any of my teachers. I had all male teachers.
Did you?
Yes.
So, and were your math teachers that you had, who I presume were men, were they encouraging of you, or were
No.
they just,
Not in college. But
they tolerated you, maybe?
Well, I was a good student, so I was allowed to stay. But I've never had a teacher say, oh, by the way, you really ought to get a master's degree or PhD. But I went to a school where it was assumed that I would get a PhD too. So I really didn't mean to. I went to University of Chicago, where everyone was expected to get a PhD. So maybe I assumed that I would do that, but no one really came to take my arm and say, you've got to do this. You apply for graduate school. But right now, for my students, I actually nurture that. I talk to students.
What do you tell them?
I tell them, I said, if I can get a PhD, so could you. And if quite a few women actually went on because I said that. It would have just beyond their dreams. They said, I never thought I am graduate school material. So I said, what do you mean? Everybody could be graduate school material. You just have to persist. And you just have to be stubborn and hang in there.
The stubbornness and the hang-in-there-ness of you.
Yes.
It's an asset for you. Tell me,
I didn't have any choice.
it was a survival tool for you in some regards then too, when you, both in the field and in the family?
And also just to be able to get through some of the courses in college because they were in English.
That's right. And so as long as you could stick to the formulas, then you could speak the language fine.
Yes,
But
for the math was easy.
Yeah.
But I remember I had to read Paradise Lost when I was here maybe just a year. I looked up every other word. I still didn't understand it. So then they threw the Iliad at me.
Oh.
They said, okay, you have to write a report on
And
this.
those are tough for people whose first language
I didn't
is
know
English.
that. I thought it was just tough for me. So, but I really did have to persist. So I looked up every word, and after I looked up the word, then I have to figure out what it means. But so that part was really harder. But I don't think life has been harder for me than for anybody else, except during the 4 years in the village. I thought, my mom still talks about it a lot. She would say, remember the time I had to do this so we can get some more rice? But we always had food, but it wasn't necessarily nutritious food.
But having experienced being without and living in one of the most abundant counties in the country.
Oh, we have too much, every one of us. Every one of us, we really have way too much.
And how do you see that as both a blessing and a cursing for people who grow up in Marin and are in this environment?
Sometimes people don't know how lucky they are, and some people tend to complain about small things, such as the weather or the traffic. I actually mentioned that to my student. I said there is a tendency to complain where we run into an inconvenience, but if you
we think that the inconvenience equals suffering, and we don't know what suffering is.
That's right. Major hardship, when you really don't know whether you can go to school ever, whether you have the opportunity to have enough food or have enough clothes. So I think that does affect my own perception of life.
Is that sort of where the I can do this attitude in you comes from?
Oh,
Is
yes.
that you know what
This
you
is
can
easy.
survive, so this is easy?
This is easy compared to the other things. Let me think. I thought there was another thing that was kind of interesting in my growing up, because I'm 10 years older than my 5 sisters. I always felt lonely, and it's hard to be included, not just in my family, but in general. I was left alone a lot in the village because my mom had to go to business. She had to go sell some old clothes and then bring home some food. And since my dad was gone, I think that affected my attitude, such as my involvement in expanding your horizon, and I'm also a faculty mentor. I want to be inclusive, and I find that in myself. I only realized that recently. I always want to include you. I don't want to exclude you. So
You want, whether it's the block party or in the conference or whatever.
Yes.
To welcome everybody to the table and say you have a right to be here, and that the connection is what is of value.
That's right. That's right. And I find that really good. That I enjoy that part of me. I went to Marin City and I volunteer as a mentor. So I work with a couple of girls in the Manzanita Child Development Center.
Right.
And that was important. It was a very important experience for me. Some of the girls felt also left out. They were left alone. So it was really special for me to be able to spend time with the 2 girls. And they look forward to my coming. I look forward to being with them.
Who were the early role models for you outside from family members that influenced you through your childhood as a young girl?
As a young girl, I think the first best friend I had was named Jean. I actually named myself after her.
You took that as your English name?
That's right.
Oh.
That's right. Because I didn't have an English name. Someone asked me in a hurry. I said, okay, I'll be Jean.
I'll be Jean.
Yes. But I am keeping my Chinese name as B-E. That's my Chinese name. It's B-E. But anyway, Jean and I were very good friends. We were in 7th and 8th grade. And she and I were good in math, and we talked to our algebra teacher. And she actually stayed afterward to chat with us from time to time. That's very unusual for a Chinese teacher to talk to the student, because Chinese teachers...
It's a very formal teaching setting.
That's right, that's right. But she stayed, and I said, gee, at the end of the book, this algebra looked really hard. And she said, no, when we get there, it won't be hard. And I remember thinking she was right. It won't be hard if I just get there. So after that, I felt more confident in math. And later on, I had a very good girlfriend in high school. And I think she probably had more influence on my taking my studies seriously than anybody else.
How'd she do that?
She thought I just got to shape up and study, because I love to play.
Ah.
And I didn't have to pick up a book. And I just listened to the teacher. She said, no, you can't do that. So she came over to study with me. And after I picked up good studying habit from her, then I started to help other students too. So I started tutoring students as a volunteer.
Well, you have a lively sense of playfulness about you, and that's not always something that people project as being an image of a mathematics professor in whatever stereotype they might have in mind. Does that playfulness enter into the classroom for you? Is that,
Oh, yes.
was that a part of your love for math?
I don't know, but I just like to joke in class.
Yeah.
And the student often noticed that. I said, you really have a good time. I said, of course. I would do this for free. It's a pleasure. So actually quite a few students decided to teach because they thought I was having such a good time.
They saw you model that it could be something different from what they might have perceived.
That could be, but I do have a good time. I think I really have the best job in the world, and I really mean it.
It's wonderful to have that sense about your work. Let's switch gears and look at a little bit at the community involvement in terms of the Asian cultural group of people within Marin and your relationship with them. Tell me a little bit about what that's like.
I founded the Asian Scholarship Endowment Fund, and at that time, I just thought we should raise some money to help the Asian immigrants. I was, and I still am, on the board of directors for Marin Education Fund. And that's MEF. MEF gets the Buck Trust money to give scholarships. But we didn't have enough. There were still people who were qualified and we couldn't grant. And that really hurt me deeply. I felt really sick. I said, this can't happen. This is Marin County, and we're not able to help people to go to college. So I just, at one board meeting, I said, I'm just going to found a scholarship. And I didn't really think through it very carefully. And after I said that, well, I really have to do it.
Yeah, I've said it now.
That's right. And so I call up the Japanese community, I call up the Korean community and the Vietnamese community. I said, you have to send representative to me so we can form a group, so we can work together. And usually the Asian groups are very separate. This is really for the first time that we got together. And I think that impressed a lot of people.
Possibly because there was a project that people were focused on, that rather than just the collecting of yourselves, there was an end in sight of what you wanted to achieve.
That's right. And people got very enthused, and they said, okay, why don't we have a fundraiser? And then one thing after another, we raised more money, and it's really been a nice project. It brought the Asian people of different countries, different ethnicity together.
And to see what their commonalities were rather than their differences in that goal that they were trying to achieve.
I think it really changed the landscape of the Asian population in Marin. I know that sounds grand, but it did have some of that effect. I'm not saying I did it myself. It's because everyone was willing to come forward and have a good time. And we still meet once a month.
Imagine for me, if you will, Jean, that there's, let's make her an 18-year-old girl from China who has arrived on the scene here and doesn't speak the language.
Okay.
And you run across her in either a social or a professional setting. Let's say she's in school up at Sonoma State.
Okay, I met someone like that.
Oh. What is it that you would say, and obviously identifying with her situation of isolation, and what would you say to her, and by way of opening up and expanding her horizons?
If you were to ask me in an ideal situation, what I would tell that 18-year-old person, I would ask her to take advantage of all the opportunities, and all she has to do is knock on the doors. They will be open for her. And also, I would say to her that she should consider going back to China also. It's not necessarily the case that she should stay in this country, because I think it's also important for her to go back to China and help build the country.
Have you been back?
I went back. I took my husband and 2 children back to China last Christmas. We spent Christmas in Beijing.
Oh.
That was a lot of fun.
What was it like for you? And introducing your children to it, I guess, for the first time.
For the first time. It was very touching. And And I thought they might not want to go, but they jumped at the chance. Well, plus my husband and I paid for it. That helped. But my husband thought it was really lots of fun. And he is trying to learn to speak Mandarin and Cantonese. But at any rate, part of the China trip was a disappointment too, because it's so polluted in Beijing. And I'm a little worried that the Chinese people are not taking care of the environment. But I think that's probably true in all developing countries. So the desire of wanting to help China grow is actually getting stronger in me. So perhaps when I'm retired, maybe I can go back to work for a year or two, and maybe we can, other countries can become more international in that we don't have to have all this separateness of different countries, and everybody can help everybody else. That would be my dream. I think that would be really nice.
Do you think you'd like to go back there and teach?
I don't know. At this time, probably not. Perhaps I can go back to be maybe as sort of an ambassador, maybe can bring people together rather than make people more separate. I would like to bring people more together because we are really much more alike than we are different. Although we may look very different, but people basically want the same thing. They want happiness, they want a good family, they want to give back to their community.
And those are universal drives within us.
That's right, that's right. And I think also when you give back to the community, and then you want to give more too, because it's so much fun to do that.